Hello, and happy Monday to everyone out there. My name is Maggie Nielsen, so happy to be here with you today. I am part of Purse Strings, where we're all about providing free financial education for women. But then once we kind of get this knowledge, we need a professional to put things in transition or transaction. So we have professionals who love to serve the female market, are great at serving the female market, and we call those our Purse Strings approved professionals. Terrie Austin is one of those. And so we're so excited to have Terrie on today to kind of share some expertise. If you're considering divorce, how to not lawyer up until you do some of these things, because if anything, I've been learning that this divorce process is in a very certain order and you really can't go backwards. So I'm excited to spread this information. So Terrie, we're so excited to have you on today. Could you just give a little intro to the audience for those who haven't met you?
Sure. I'm so excited to be here. This is my actual first real Facebook Live. I've done some other things, but not a Facebook Live. So we'll hope for the best. I'm Terrie Austin. I'm the founder of Modern Divorce Solutions, and I actually sit here in Ohio, but I can work nationwide. I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years, and the last few years of my practice, I just kept running into women who had already gotten divorced, and we start talking about what they have and what they have to work with after the process and how the division happened and what he got and what she got. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, how come you didn't ask for this or you didn't ask for that? And the answer is always something along the lines that it was just too emotional. I just wanted out. And and I didn't know, and it sounded like it seemed fair. And it's just, we are conditioned as women and as girls to not rock the boat, be nice, don't say no, or, and you don't, so many women, and I did the same thing. I didn't want to give my husband a reason to go around town telling people I took him to the cleaners, and so women have that in the back of their minds, but they're going to do it anyway. So the reality is we just need to, get in front of the process. And that's what made me want to do it. And I like to consider myself a disruptor in the divorce process. The first thing people want to do is just call the attorney. I've made the decision. I'm calling the attorney, and the attorney has a role. They have to file the papers for you. They have to make sure the wording is right and we haven't left anything out and all the bases are covered, and get you through the court process. But there is so much to do on the front end to get your ducks in a row, so to speak, before you even take that step.
Definitely. And so I'm glad you're here to kind of explain all this, because if you go with an attorney right away, it's very expensive, A, but B, they don't have all the financial knowledge that you have, because that's not their expertise. And you have a CDFA, which is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, correct?
Yes.
And so really you're a trusted partner through the divorce process, answering the questions and really taking the fear out of the unknown.
Right.
Do you want to say something else?
No, I was just going to say, and as a CDFA, there are several people, many people in the U.S. who have gotten the designation and they don't really do anything with it. So don't let that designation of the when you're talking to someone. And I'm going to recommend at some point that, you do talk to someone, but, and find out how much work they actually do in divorce, and do they know the language, and do they, know the process. But the CDFA is very important. It does give us extra information and knowledge.
Definitely. And that's why we want to have you here for this conversation. And if you're listening right now and you think it doesn't apply to you, you should still listen, because probably someone could benefit from this information we're going to share. And it's no secret that 50% of marriages end in divorce, even more if you're on your second or your third marriage. So before you seek an attorney to make the final decision about divorce, there are a few steps you must take to ensure the best outcome for you and your family. So we're going to share today the five important things you must do before you utter the words to your spouse about your desire to end the marriage. And so, Terrie, since you're a financial expert, I'm guessing your tips have to do with money. What is the first thing that someone should do if they're contemplating divorce?
Well, most people have by the time they're getting to this place, they've put 10 years, invested 10 or more years into a marriage and a financial partnership, or an economic partnership, which is what a marriage is. And so, but then when the divorce comes along, we get so emotional, but we have to stop in our tracks and deal with the emotions and maybe hire a therapist over here on the side. But the most important thing you've got to think about is the financial aspect of it all. And so what you have to do first thing is figure out, what do I know? Evaluate your finances. Do I know where everything is, or have I let my spouse take care of it all? And I just, sign my name, or even today in the world of e-filing, you don't even sign your name anymore.
Right.
So find out what you know and try to figure out, have I been away from all this for too long? Or if you're the one that's been paying all the bills and you're working with a financial advisor and all that stuff, then you're in really great shape, but most people aren't. So the first step is to just sort of think about and figure out what you know. And I would say this is probably the step where you want to find that CDFA, or a certified divorce financial analyst, who's got experience in financial planning and working specifically with divorce, through divorce, as a mediator, as a financial neutral, and can really start to help you kind of quarterback that process for you and get you through it.
And there's so many different nuances that go into this. So I also recommend a CDFA, just because there's so many things that you don't know what you don't know. And so you think you have all, your I's dotted and your T's crossed, but then, something else was there that you didn't quite know about. So after you find a CDFA and get the game plan together, what are the next steps?
Well, you have to start gathering documents. And this is really important today, too, because so much comes electronically. We don't get all of our statements in the mail anymore, and you can't intercept something from the mailbox like you used to be able to. So, you need to get out there and think, okay, I know there's retirement. I know we have this account. I know we work at, LPL Financial. We have investments there. So try to come up with statements. If you know the login information, record it, go in there, print off the most recent statement, or at least, on a computer, but getting everything together. And there's a list. I mean, the CDFA will tell you a list of all the things that you should get together. And it seems so tedious and like it's so much, but the reason that we need these documents is because these documents tell us a story. They're just numbers on a paper to most people. But when I look at someone's pay stub, I can see all the little withdrawals that are going out. And, you might think, oh, my spouse ends up depositing $3,000 out of every paycheck, so that's all we make. There might be $6,000 that is really in that paycheck, and they could be investing in an extra stock fund. They could be sending money off to somewhere else to be invested. They're most likely investing in a 401k, and those all tell a story to us. And tax returns tell us the same thing. You might think, oh, we don't have any more accounts. This is all we have. But if I look at a tax return and I see a large amount of capital gains from a particular brokerage firm, I might ask, well, what about this account at Fidelity? No one's mentioned this one yet. And then, so they tell us a story, and we can find things. So we'll need tax returns, bank account statements, investment account statements, pay stubs. It's a really overwhelming amount of information, but many times, especially if you haven't shown your hand yet, and said anything about divorce, we can help you figure out how to get to all that stuff. And it sounds sneaky, and I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to be sneaky. I don't advocate divorce. I've been divorced. It's terrible, no matter whose idea it is. It's just awful, and it's not pleasant. But if you're headed in that direction, it's self-preservation, and you're protecting yourself. And everybody's entitled, and don't ever let anybody tell you that you don't deserve something, because like I said, marriage is an economic partnership, and you guys made decisions along the way. And if one person stayed home and the other person worked, it's all still shared. Shared. So the bottom line is, and I can give you a list of all the things that we would need, but the best thing to do is once you talk with the CDFA in the first step, they'll say, okay, our next step is to get all these documents together. And so we can take a look at them and try and see what they tell us.
Yeah, all those documents are very important because those are, big decisions. If one said they were staying home, those are long-term effect decisions, which, play into that story as well. And I like that you mentioned that it's not being sneaky. I mean, at the end of the day, they are part of your funds as well,
Right.
because they're part of that family economic system. And so there's no reason you shouldn't have your hands on it.
Exactly.
And so after, you've gathered all the documents, what's next?
Well, it's clearly just getting organized. However you come up with those documents, we have to have those organized in a way that we can access them easily. So whether it's, in the old days, we used to say, get a file box or put them in a 3-ring binder, but the less paper we can come up with, the better off we are. And we can sometimes organize them much more neatly in a Dropbox folder or something like that. So, and I also tell people part of getting organized is, and I've got a client right now where we had to do this. She said, I think my husband knows my email password. So I said, so change it. And she goes, well, then he's going to ask me why I changed it. And I said, so get a new email. So she got a new email address through Gmail, so there are little things like that about getting organized. And, if your only access to cash is joint accounts and joint credit cards, now might be a time to go on and apply for your own credit card in your own name, because you're going to have to do that eventually anyway. So you just don't want to get caught, I want to say you don't want to get caught with your pants down. That's probably not the best thing, but that's the analogy to use. And you can never trust that, I'm working with a woman now. She drug her feet for 2 years because she said, well, he wants a divorce and he's already moved out. And I know he has a girlfriend, but he isn't pushing the issue and he's still paying all the bills. So, and I kept telling her, you've got to do something. You can't sit here and be in this reactive position. And sure enough, eventually he just finally said, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to do this. Let's do it. And she hadn't done any of this. And so now we scramble to get it all together, and you never know. So anyway, it's getting organized is step number 3, and your CDFA can help you do that too.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's definitely bigger than just, filing some papers, because it is these little steps of like, okay, do I need a new email? Do I need a new this? So those are really great tips to get, because even your credit, you're going to need to start building your own credit even higher if you haven't been focusing on that. And so those are good things just to get started, because sometimes they just take time.
Right.
You just need time. All right. So we have 1, 2, and 3, find your CDFA, gather your documents, organize them up. What is the 4th step?
And this is another one where most people don't know this either, but the 4th step is really to research alternatives and decide how you want to get divorced. Most people think, everybody gets an attorney and you write emails back and forth and you argue for 1.5 years and then you go to court and then it's over. And
it's definitely an option.
And that's an option. That's a very expensive and time-consuming option. And so, but who wants that? I feel like, again, the reason I just want to disrupt this whole process is marriage is emotional. Most people get married in a church. It had nothing to do with, you had to go get a marriage license and that was about it. And you signed your paper. But when you get divorced, it becomes this ugly legal process, almost like in a criminal environment inside a courthouse with a bunch of attorneys. And it's not the best option. There are other ways. There's what's called collaborative divorce. Not every state has this, but many states do have a legislative process called collaborative divorce, where both sides have an attorney, but they're collaboratively trained and they've agreed to collaborate in a process, and we all work together. And so in that process, you have 2 collaboratively trained attorneys, a collaboratively trained financial neutral, which I serve as that in a lot of cases here in town. And there's a therapist who's referred to as a family coach, and she helps you get through the tough issues in the room. So everybody's in the room together. We schedule it on your schedule. We coordinate these 6 schedules. But, if you're in a litigated divorce, you've got to schedule a court date and it might get canceled, and there could be weather, and there could be another case that took precedent. And it could just drag out forever and ever and ever. And collaborative divorce is on your terms. The attorneys are there just to tell you what is likely to happen in a litigated situation. And so then you can make your decisions based on that. And everybody's giving and taking, and we're coming up with really creative solutions of how to get things done. You can also mediate. I'm working with a couple different couples right now who their children are emancipated, grown and gone. And it's the two of them. And strangely enough, after 40 years of marriage, they're calling it quits. And what they have to do is basically just figure out the financial part. So,
Right.
if you can find someone who's qualified to help you with that, and a lot of mediators are not, but I'm also trying to educate mediators too, that when it gets complicated financially in your cases, call me. Let me help
Right.
figure this out, because there's more to it than you think. It gets complicated when you're trying to divide tax assets that are tax advantaged and assets that aren't, and complicated executive benefits and pensions and things like that. So, there are just so many different ways that you can go through this process. And that's why I think this, a CDFA or even a divorce
Mhm.
coach can help you decide, what do I need to do here? Is it necessary for us both to lawyer up, or could we try this less adversarial approach first?
Right. And it's such a money saver. And just to, be my own plug here, Purse Strings has all these different professionals. If you do want to do mediation or CDFA or a divorce coach or any of those different options. And the other thing I always like to highlight here is once you file the papers, you can't really then go back and be like, nah, mediation sounds better. But you can
Right.
try these other options. And if it doesn't work, you could go to court.
Right.
So I always think it's better to have the most options and kind of start there versus once you file those papers, you're done. I mean, it's in the legal system.
Yeah, it's in the system. And the other thing is the work that you do with a CDFA prior to, all this lead in steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I'm talking to you about. If you end up in the most adversarial litigated divorce ever, and it's a big giant fight, all the work that we've done is not wasted time or money. First of all, we're less expensive than big shot attorneys.
Yes.
Secondly, this work then that we do and all this groundwork that we lay then makes the job for your attorney much easier. And
Mhm.
you, as the client, go to your attorney prepared and educated and understand. And if you don't understand something, you have someone you can call now and ask the real question. Because if you ask an attorney, does this make sense that I should only take 30% of his pension? The attorney has no idea about that. They'll write it up once you decide, but they can't tell you what your life is going to look like financially at the end of all this. So all the work that we're doing in these first few steps are not, it's not wasted.
We always have to remember that we have to find the professionals. The attorneys are good for the legal part, but they don't know
Yeah.
the finances. We find the financial people for the financial part. It's everyone stays in their lane, and that's great because then they're really knowledgeable. But we have to make sure we find all those moving pieces.
Right.
So it really is a team approach, no matter which way you go about your divorce process.
Right.
So we found our CDFA. We gathered our documents. We organized them. We researched into some alternatives. What is this fifth and final step?
The last step is to tell your spouse or have the conversation. I mean, maybe your spouse has told you, or maybe you are suspecting, because, most of the time we're not caught completely off guard. We kind of had a feeling something was going on. Or if you're the one that's initiating and you've just decided this isn't for you and you've exhausted all possibilities and you've through these processes to prepare yourself and be ready for this, then you need to tell your spouse. And you can't do it in an email or a text. And if you've got kids, it's a good time to let them go stay at grandma's house, or just have the conversation and expect it to be emotional expect it to get maybe loud and upset, but then also understand that your spouse is probably going to need some time
Mhm.
to process everything you've said, especially if you are kind of springing this on them. But you just, that's the last thing after you've prepared yourself and you've gotten all your ducks in a row and you feel ready. The last step is telling your spouse.
It's the hardest part at the end, but hopefully it's for the best and will turn out the best in the long run, which is most important.
Right.
And so, I appreciate you sharing with these 5 steps before talking to a lawyer, because they all are very important, and you can see how they really save time and make you more money in the long run, having that right financial picture so you can come out of the divorce, not broke and, in debt and different things, hopefully.
Right, right. And I'll tell you just one other thing too. I know that we were talking about how once you file the papers and you're in the system, you're in the system, and it can get very expensive. But I'll just tell you a real quick story if I have 5 minutes or
Yeah,
two.
go for it.
Um, I did a few years ago, a woman called me and she was referred to me from a forensic accountant because her attorney wanted her to hire a forensic accountant because they suspected that the husband was hiding money in a business he had opened in Florida. And this couple had been trying for 2.5 years to get divorced, and they had spent $20,000 a piece already,
Whew.
just going back and forth. And she just, when she finally talked to me and we were sitting there, she said, I just don't know what to do. And she had all these papers and she goes, he gave me this proposal 2 years ago and I didn't know if it was a good idea or not. My attorney told me I shouldn't do it if he's hiding money. And then he's given me this proposal and this one and this one and this one. And my attorney doesn't listen to me. And so, long story short, she knew they'd been married for 30 years. She knew her husband might be playing a little bit of games, but she goes, if he's hiding money, it's not that much. And she said, but I don't even know if what he's offering me, what this means. I mean,
Right.
can I live on this? And so we went through a process and figured it out. And she said, okay, great. If he will still agree to this, and you say this is what my life will look like under this scenario, I'll take it. And
Right.
just for this to be over. And sometimes when you're making an educated decision about compromise in order for it to be over, it's okay because there is a price for peace, I call it.
Yes.
But you don't want to give the farm away without understanding and being fully informed. And so,
Right.
anyway, I worked with this woman and we went back and forth with her husband for a couple of months. And we got him to agree to an additional, keeping her on the insurance policy for a little longer just to protect her for the next 10 years in case something happened. And we got kind of creative with some of the solutions. And
Yeah.
he finally reluctantly agreed to it all. So, after 2.5 years, she stopped the system and she talked to me and we worked it out and they were divorced in 2.5 months. So, and they didn't even have to go to court. We had a private
Right.
judge come to the attorney's office, which we do all the time. Um,
Hmm.
so you don't even really have to go to court. So, so don't think that if you're already in the system and it's ugly that there's nowhere else to turn, because you can
Right.
just put the brakes on and call somebody and say, wait, is there a better way to do this? Because the
Right.
reality is only about 5% of litigated divorces actually end up in court with a judge deciding those things.
Really?
Yes. It goes back, and mine was one of those. We both had attorneys, went back and forth for a year and a half. And then we had our final court date. And that would have been the day that the judge would have said, you get this, you get that. If you can't decide, blah, blah, blah. Our attorneys called us to the courthouse an hour before the hearing time. And we went into a conference room and we all sat there and we went through it and we made the decision because we were just mentally exhausted and we kind of knew what we wanted anyway. We made
Yeah.
the decision there. So the judge didn't even do it. And we could have done that a year prior. Why
Wow.
didn't we sit down a year prior and make those same decisions? But they didn't give us that option.
Hmm.
which is interesting because, if that can happen a year and a half down the road, why couldn't it have happened 6 months earlier? So anyway, yeah, there's still hope. If you're in the system, you can put the brakes on and start asking questions and talk to some other people and see if there's another way out.
That's a great piece of advice. And anyone who's still jumping in, feel free to throw any questions in the chat. Otherwise, you can always message Terrie or email her or Purse Strings to help out with these questions as well. And so, Terrie, are there any final remarks that you want to share with our community before we kind of wrap up here?
I think that's just the only thing. I don't advocate divorce because it is awful. But if you are prepared and this is where it's going, that's just what you can't go into it blind, and you can't give up the farm. And that's why I say I want to educate women enough to understand, and so that they can make an informed decision, because most decisions in divorce are not well informed. You just think, well, this is what the attorneys have put in front of me. And, many times one spouse is digging their heels in. You just have to know what to expect and what's fair. I've had women come to me and say, well, my husband says that I'm working with a woman right now, and her husband doesn't want the divorce. She does. He's very much control freak. And he's telling her he said, I'll go down fighting. I'm not giving you half of my retirement. You didn't work. You didn't earn it. But the reality was, and so if she didn't talk to somebody like me, she might think, well, maybe he has a point. I didn't work. But that was a joint decision for you not to work. And you haven't not been working. You've been working at home, and it's a job that's not well paid. So, it's just, don't listen to the little person in your head that's telling you maybe he's right, maybe they're right, maybe I don't deserve it. Talk to someone who can tell you the truth about what you deserve. I'm not an attorney. I'm not in it to give legal advice at all, but I can look at the finances and help you decide, even if one of you had assets prior to divorce, there's a way to separate those out. And we do separate asset tracing and tell you that even though he worked for 10 years before you guys got married, you've been married for 20. So 20 years of this giant retirement plan is half yours. So just don't hesitate to hire the professional.
Yeah, you've really got to advocate for yourself and work on making the best out of the situation, out of a bad situation. Make sure you'll be okay later. Just get through the process with somebody who has, their mind straight and can really help you.
Right.
So I really appreciate you coming on today, Terrie, and really giving us these 5 great pieces of advice. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they have more questions, want the list of documents that they might need for divorce? Or I know you offer a free 30-minute session, correct?
I do. So my website is moderndivorcesolutions.com. You can schedule a complimentary session from my website. There's a link there to go on and choose your time on the calendar. You can find me through Purse Strings, the website. I'm there as one of the professionals that, what are we called?
Purse Strings approved professionals. It's a mouthful.
Yeah. So I'm there. So any way that you want to get in touch with me, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Terrie. Today was great. We appreciate everyone coming to our Monday Mondays, and we will be back here again next week at 1:30 Central to have another live session. But until then, we'll see you later. Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.